Hello and welcome. In this video demo, we are going to talk about a really interesting and sometimes confusing concept called cross-origin resource sharing, or CORS. So let's get ahead and look at some theory and literature for CORS and what would be better than Wikipedia. So as per Wikipedia, cross-origin resource sharing is a mechanism that allows restricted resources, example fonts, on a web page to be requested from another domain outside the domain from the first resource was served. A web page may freely embed cross-origin images, style sheets, scripts, iframe, and videos. Certain cross-domain requests, notably AJAX requests, however, are forbidden by the default by the same origin security policy. CORS defines a way in which a browser and a server can interact to determine whether or not it is safe to allow the cross-origin request. It allows for more freedom and functionality than purely same origin requests, but is more secure than simply allowing all cross-origin requests. It is a standard recommended by W3C. Though the definition and the concept is very well articulated, it is tough to imagine this in real world scenario unless you actually go and do it. And this is exactly we will be doing in this demo using just your local machine setup. So what exactly we are going to do in this demo is create a very simple Java Spring Boot based REST API, and which will have a get endpoint / user info. And just to name this server and hosting, we will be calling it as and referring it will be as my third domain API server.com. The next part of the development of the implementation would be to create two simple HTML Angular apps. We will be calling them my first domain.com and my second domain.com. And in terms of logic or implementation, they will have similar logic, which will be calling the / user info get endpoint on the Java based API. And once the development effort is complete, we will try to host these, all three of these, the two Angular apps and one Java app locally. And for the Angular HTML apps, I'm going to use Python HTTP server, which is really easy, comes in built with Python. And Spring Boot is self-sufficient to host its own environment and serve HTTP traffic. So that will be the ops part of it. And the test would be to check if these both Angular apps are able to make that call to the Java API and get back data with and without CORS enabled. And during the development, first we will do without CORS, so I can show you what the real problem is and what CORS actually do. And then we will do a little more development effort to develop a CORS solution on the Java Spring Boot app. And to help you picturize this, I have a really small diagram where I have tried to depict what exactly we will be doing. So let's check the diagram out. So here we have the pictorial depiction of what we are trying to achieve in this demo. So as you can see, we have two HTML Angular apps deployed as domain 1 and domain 2. Then this is the browser or the user who can access each of these websites. And then this is the browser, since your website is loaded within your browser being HTML and just JavaScript. We'll try to make a call to the API server, which is nothing but our domain 3 server Java Spring Boot app, and try to get that user info. And this is where the CORS will play a picture between the browser and the domain 3 API server. So this is a really simple CORS scenario, and we will try to get this entire setup working. So let's get started and with the implementation. So here we are within my Eclipse IDE, and please bear with me while I create the Spring Boot app, which will host our REST endpoint / user info. So we are trying to create a Spring Boot project, and I have the Spring STS plugin installed within my IDE. So I should have this. This is a really nice wizard setup and lets you do a lot more easily. So I'm going to call this my third domain API server.com, and I'm going to copy this and change the group name. I'm going to change the artifact name. I'm going to change the package name. I want it to be a Gradle STS and really want it to be 1.8. Okay, let's go ahead and pick up the dependencies. So we're going to pick up Lombok. This is really handy dependency for your setter getters, for no arc constructors. You can just use annotations, and then there is really annotation for toString, for hash, everything. And for the Spring, we'll just use the web. So I'm going to say next and finish, and this will give me a very nice pre-plumbed Spring Boot project. So it should be done in a couple of seconds. Doesn't really do not take that much of time. Okay, so here we have the Spring Boot project ready, and let's open it. And we see we have all these dependencies already coming from Gradle and the ones we selected. I'm just going to make it a little more easier to look at. I have Gradle plugin also installed, so I'm going to just say enable dependency management, and they all go in the Gradle dependency part. Alright, so as we know, we have the Spring Boot project. This is the default class, and this is generated by Spring, so we have the application, and this is how the Spring Boot application starts. So I'm quickly going to create a resource and then put an endpoint in it. I'm going to create a package. I'm going to call it resources. Well, and then I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it demo course resources. The name really does not matter. And then I'm going to do @REST controller, and so before that I'm going to create a really small private class within this, and which will host some of the properties we are trying to expose through that /user info endpoint. So I'm going to do private static final class user, and I'm gonna create two attributes to it, both string name, and so let's call it first name and string last name. Alright, and this is where we're going to use the Lombok annotations. We're going to just do getter, setter, and get the imports. Setter mock. Cool. So we have this user defined, and it says not being used, but we'll say hey public return user info well, and we're gonna say hey user go to new user, user dot set first name, it's wrong, query fix itself, and then just really user dot set last name, and I'm gonna my last name. Alright, and I'm gonna say return user. Alright, time to make it accessible. I'm gonna provide it with request mapping, and value is /user info, and the method is request method dot get. Cool. So this is more or less what our Java app will be doing, and just to put a little more configuration for the startup, we're gonna run it on port 8050. So I'm quickly gonna make this as YAML. I like YAML more, so this goes as YAML, and then in the YAML I'm gonna define this server dot port as 8050. Alright, so this should be it, and we should be able to start the Spring Boot app and see if that we're able to access the /user info endpoint or not. Okay, so application did come up at 8050. So here we are in the browser, and we're going to try to run that endpoint. Put 8050, call it as user info. Okay, so we're able to run the Java API and get back the response from it. So the next step for us would be to make those two simple HTML Angular apps and call this /user endpoint from those Angular apps. So let's get back to our IDE and start creating those apps. So for the second part of the demo and the implementation, we will be creating a static web project or website, and then attach some Angular libraries to it. So I'm going to do this static web project. I'm going to call it my first domain.com, and actually I'm going to use a predefined location for it where I have few files ready, so it will be easier for the demo purpose that we quickly write the code. It's okay. And if we go here, web content and index.html and index.js, so both these files are prepared before the demo, and they're really simple. The intent of the demo is not to write index.html or HTML or JavaScript. So if I go and look at the content, is really doing nothing, is getting this two Angular libraries. Then this is the index.js which we have defined here, and then what it is doing is using the Angular ng app and ng controller. It's giving us a label saying that, hey, this is website 1 hosted at localhost 8000. We will see how we're gonna host it at port 8000 locally, and then this is the this is where the data from the user info will be coming from. So it will be user info, first name, and user info, last name. And this is the HTML, and similarly with the index.js, this is really simple Angular code, nothing much here. So we're saying, hey, when you load this app and get the user info in this variable, and the way you're going to do it is go call localhost 8050 user info, and once we have that data, this will show up in this index.html. Okay, so let's start this service and see, or let's start this website on the Python 8000 port and see if the data is shown on the browser or not. Okay, so let's get this website running. So I'm gonna go to my command line. I am at my first domain web content directory, and let's see if we have our contents here. Okay, so we have our index.html and index.js present. So let me just start the Python server really easy, and I'm going to define port as 8000. So okay, so it started really fast and really simple to do that. And before we hit this localhost 8000, let's go and check if our API is still running. So localhost 8050, and we're gonna say, hey, user info. Okay, so API is working, and from the browser we are able to receive HTML what we define in the API. Okay, time for us to access the same data from the Angular app or the HTML. Okay, so it did say, okay, this is the website 1 hosted at localhost 8000, which we hard coded, and this was the part which was supposed to give us the host name and the host address. Let me go change them to first name and last name to make it more relevant. So this is first name and this is last name. Sorry about that, this was my other demo I was trying for the host name and the host address, so it got a little mixed up. Anyways, so let's go there and try to refresh it. Okay, so first name is, last name is, but the data is not showing up. The data should be coming from the Angular code we written in the index.js while calling that user info endpoint on the Java API, but it did not. So let's deep down, go a little deep and see so what's happening behind the curtains. So let's go and open the developer options, and I'm going to say network, and here we are, and let's reload the page. Okay, so what happened? So the first call was to localhost 8000, which was a get, and that's how we landed up with this content from the index.html. The other two calls were to get the Angular libraries or the Angular JS from the internet, which did happen. The fourth call was for the index.js, which is defined here, and it's on the same domain. It says localhost 8000. The final call was for the /user info hosted at localhost 8050, but though it made a call, the data was not received. And if I look at these things, what was happening? So we got the request made, and the origin was this, but the host was this. And if you go to response, you see, hey, something happened. It was not able to parse the JSON. Though it's a little misleading, the real error is not here. So the real error is if you go to the console and see this. So it says clearly that the request was not served and was blocked because of the CORS, which is cross-origin request sharing, and it was blocked because this particular header in the response was missing. So though since this website, the local HTTP 8000 website is on my local, and the Java API is also on my local, they are running on two different origins. And because of that, the resource sharing is not happening. And this is exactly the purpose of CORS, that if your target does not support this or does not allow cross origin requests, it will deny it and you will not be able to fetch the data. But again, the important part here is to understand that the request is originating from the browser, and this is why this is happening. So if you go back to the network again and filter, so right now it's on all, that's why you're seeing all of these. But if you go to this XML HTTP request, you only say this, and this makes this request special because it's an AJAX call made within the browser. And this is where the server is saying, hey, though I'm able to send it to this origin if the request is originating from here, but not actually. So the domain got changed to 8050, and that is why the resource was blocked. So now the solution part is, how do we enable this and how do we manage these different origins? So let's focus now on the other part, that how do we configure our server to allow requests from localhost 8000. So now we will enable the CORS capability on our API server, and one way to do it is to implement a filter, and we are calling this filter as a simple CORS filter. And filters are part of Java, and we use them for many other purposes. And for enabling CORS, we are again going to use CORS filter, where we're going to intercept the request and response, and in the response put that particular header, and we're going to talk about that header again when we are implementing this particular filter. So we're going to do this, and then we will say, okay, go ahead and implement filter, which is from Java, and we're going to select Java servlet. And now, as per the contract, we have to go ahead and implement these methods. So, okay, so just for small little logging purposes, I'm gonna create a logger, and we will log few data. simple CORS filter dot class. Bear with me here, guys. This is going to take a little while, but it will be worth seeing that how we're gonna do it. We're gonna implement this simple CORS filter. I'm gonna say, hey, logger.info initializing CORS filter. And this is the do filter. We're going to write the logic or enable the CORS part of the request and response. So the first will be HTTP servlet request. I'm going to say call it as request to use to HTTP servlet request. Let's see, I'm going to get the imports and we're going to use this. Alright, request to use, and similarly we're going to typecast servlet response to response to using HTTP servlet response, and this is the response object right here. Alright, and I'm going to import this guy here. Okay, and so let's use these now. Response to use dot set header, and the header name is so that we don't make a spelling mistake. So we're going to go to the browser and take the header name from here, and we're going to talk about this header a little more. So this is needed. Let's say okay, this, and the value. So the value, if you remember, the origin was part of the request. So if we go here and if you look at the headers, the request header have this header called origin, and which is this. So we're going to use this header's value and put it back to the this header in the response, and this should do. So we're going to say request to use dot get header, and the name is origin. Okay, and then when that's done, we're gonna say chain dot do filter, and yep, that should be it. So this is the simplest form of CORS filter implementation which we are doing for now, and let's see if this works. But there are many more things which we'll be doing in this demo itself. But let's see if the theory of providing access control around origin really works or not. Okay, so let's start the server once again and see if this filter is picked up by Spring, and we should be seeing this logger message in the console. So I'm going to do this, run as Spring Boot app, and let's expand the console. So that is starting up our Spring Boot application. And alright, so we see these two lines, which means that okay, our simple CORS filter was registered with the Spring, and it also got initialized. That's why we got this initializing CORS filter from this class. Okay, so let's go to our browser and check if the API is still working. So I'm going to refresh this. Alright, so we're able to receive the data from the user info with this filter also. Okay, so let's see if the index HTML or our first domain.com is now able to get the data from this endpoint or not. So 8000, enter. Okay, so this time you see we were able to get the data, and let's go and look what happened. network and refresh again. So alright, so this time this was made, and you see that this header is now present because we made sure this header is present in our code, and it says okay, the access control allow origin is this, which was sent in as the origin and returned back as access control allow origin. And if this time we go to response, you see that we have the data coming back from the endpoint. And just to double check, let's go to console. Okay, so the cross origin request error is gone, and this is why we are able to see this data coming from the API, though the API and the static website of Angular are on different domains or origin. But that's really not it, because the way we have defined this simple CORS filter makes it more, more open and vulnerable. So what we're mostly doing is, say, whatever origin is coming from the request, we're setting it back to the response, which is essentially not a good thing unless you run a public API or a public system where you want anybody or everybody to access your resources within the CORS policy, and then you can have your authorization and authentication apart from this. So we're going to tweak this filter a little more and see how we can control these origins within the API, and see only those origins are able to access the resources hosted within this API. So before we make that simple CORS filter more robust, let's start and implement our myseconddomain.com. And let's go here, myseconddomain.com, and again I'm going to use a location which I have configured. A second, finish. Okay. Again, this has index.html and index.js, but what we're really going to do is copy the content from this guy over there, so that difference that they are two different things, and same with the JS. And okay, so logically both of them are the same, but we will need two different domains and two different websites to exhibit how we can play around with origin header and control that origin header within the CORS filter or within your API to allow one origin versus not allow the other origin. So this being done, our second website is also prepared, and let's go and try to start this also. Okay, so here we are within the My Second Domain web content, and let's start this one at port 9000, server 1000. Alright, and go to the browser and see if you're able to access this. Alright, so it says web 2 and localhost this, but we're still not able to see the first name and the last name. I think because I've killed the server. Let's go and check that. So I'm going to start the server again, and then again go back to the seconddomain.com and see if it's still able to show the first name and last name. Alright, so here we go, and let's try to refresh this. Okay, so here we're able to see the Hitesh and Bargujar, but if we go here and go to the network, this time the origin would be localhost 9000. Let me refresh this, and let's go here and see. So the access control was this, and the origin was this. And the same goes with this one when we do this. So your origin is 8000, and your ACAO is also 8000. So right now what we have done is, since we are not doing much in the CORS filter, basically what it's doing is fetching the origin header from the request and directly putting it in the ACAO header. But we're gonna implement a small logic to restrict that and allow only the origin for application 8000. So let's stop the server first, and the way we are going to do it is through simple logic, but you can make it again really complex. Again, this is a very simple core filter. There are tons of things you can do within a course filter. You can make very intriguing policies, you can control the URL patterns and all those things. But for simplicity, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a list of string, and I'm going to call them allowed origins, and I want this to be static and final. Again guys, so you can make it you can do this other ways also, but this is the simplest way I can think of it right now. HTTP thousand. There we go. Alright, what's the problem? Alright. Java util. Cool. Alright. So that's gone, and the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna do this incoming origin from request, and this is nothing but request to use. I'm gonna get this, and we're gonna say, hey, if allowed origin dot contains incoming origin, then only do this, and this is going to be this. So now what will happen is the incoming origin will be compared to this list. I've hard-coded for now in this class, but there are various ways to configure this allowed origin list within your application, and you can keep on appending the list. You can make the list bigger or shorter. You can configure it time to time. But for the simplicity of the demo, I'm going to do this. So all we said is, hey, if the allowed origin contains this origin, then only do this, else it will not be allowed. Okay, so let's see if this will work for us or not. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this again. Let's say Spring Boot app. Alright, so the app started. Let's go and check if the API is still working. Okay, the API is still working, and let's go and go to the 9000 first, and let's see if this guy works this time. Alright, so Hitesh and Badguja, first name and last name is not coming up, and let's go and see, and there you go again. So since we have blocked this particular origin, Hitesh and Badguja are not showing up, and let's see if the localhost 8000 works or not. Alright, so let's move to the localhost 8000, and let me refresh this. Okay, so you did see that Hitesh and Badguja got returned to this origin versus this origin, and this is how a very simple demonstration of how the origin works and how you can control these origins within your app, and you can make use of CORS and add in that extra level of security or access the way your resources or the way your information is exposed. Okay, so this is where we started. We implemented this Java Spring Boot app with /userinfo endpoint. Then we created these two simple HTML and Angular apps with first name and second, first domain.com, second domain.com. We were able to host all three of them, and then we were able to test it with and without CORS on first domain and second domain. And let me open the diagram again. So this is the diagram where we started, and this is what we did, and we were able to stand up this domain, first domain, the second domain, the API server, and from the browser we were able to make those requests with had origin as header and the domain name as localhost 8000, and when we were calling this, it was localhost 9000, And from the API server, we were able to expose the header and the response, the ACAO, which is the access control allowed origins. And there are a few more headers, guys, if you want to go and explore, but the basic idea of the concept remains the same. Again, you can relax, or you can make your course policy strict, or relax your policy depending upon how you're designing your application. But in the big picture, this is how the course work. I hope you like this demo, and you will find this useful for some of your works at your office, or if you're doing this just for fun. Thank you.